Well, you know what? I think we should dive into it. So, we've kind of been, we did a very casual introduction, but I'll do a little bit more of a formal one. So I'll start with myself. I am the developer advocate here at Stackbit, and I'm really excited we've been working on this webinar for a while now with Contentstack. So I'm really excited to dive into it with you both and just have a really candid and informative conversation. And I'll pass it on to Nick if you want to give a little intro on yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Nice to virtually meet everyone out there in cyberspace, I guess, if we still use that term. I've been in the CMS world for multiple decades now, which is wild. And currently, I'm on the partner and technical enablement team here at Contentstack. So I'm sort of a super nerd attached to all things kind of partner and technology ecosystem.
That's great.
Awesome.
And Dan, yourself?
So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Stackbit, and a lot of this has come, from I think my personal experience with how developers and business users, like marketers, work together. Companies I've worked for in the past, and my co-founders also have like a vast background in modern web technologies, so kind of came together to create Stackbit.
Perfect. Well, let's dive into it then. So the agenda for today, we're going to start with doing an introduction on composable architecture. Dan, I'm really excited for some upcoming slides that you have with the Lego. You've converted me from a puzzle person to now a Lego person. So Nick, just be prepared. And then we're going to get into a bit more on Stackbit and also Contentstack. And we're going to end with a demo.
Sounds great. Cool. So I think Nick will take us definitely into the explain a lot more about headless CMSs and kind of like give us a little bit of that background. So just as like a high level analogy, for you guys to remember, and again, this is like my personal one. I think the monolithic digital experience platforms, like the all-in-one bundled solutions are essentially like Playmobil. Right. So it's like they're good for a specific purpose, and they're giving you a lot of out of the box immediately, but they're inflexible. You can change them. Right. If you've had these toys, they work, they're great. But kids usually outgrow them pretty fast because, again, you can change them. So they don't adapt to the needs of growing kids. And I think like the analogy here is like the companies and enterprises' needs as well and requirements keeps evolving. So like what worked for you, a specific month won't work in 6 months, etc. Compared to that, I think what everybody likes is Legos, right? So that's like the next slide shows essentially the how you wish you got that castle, right? So it's like, yeah, it looks amazing, it looks great, everything's composable, you can mix and match and essentially express yourself, and if things change down the line, you can like change with it without kind of tearing down the whole structure. What you want though is this, right? You want this like nice set, and not like what you're getting if you're going to buy like just bulk Legos. So that's like the next slide, right? If you go ahead, nobody goes ahead and buys like, oh, just like give me, maybe I do, as you can see, I'm a Lego fan, but most folks need a set, right? So you need all the pieces you need, only the pieces you need, and the instructions, right? And from that starting point where things have been set up with best practices, etc., you can start evolving, right? So I think that's like the analogy I wanted to lead with, right? And essentially, it's like clearly having things composable is great, and I think some of the aversion people might have to start from very, very scratch is like, how do I know what to get to, right? And I think like companies like Contentstack and like Stackbit help guide and provide these best practices to move forward with.
Yeah, I mean, just to pile on, pun intended. I think that this is where a lot of businesses start, right? Is just, or at least historically have started, is just by saying we're going to grab this and this and this and this, and then you end up with, a pile of technologies, and that's the fear, right? Is that I'm going to have this thing now as an IT director or a head of marketing. What do I do with all of these different things, right? And I think we've we've evolved a little bit past the pile, right? And it's now, when we're starting to come with some of these pre-composed solutions or coming with these best practices that you were mentioning, Dan, that alleviates so much of the strain and the stress from the businesses themselves in terms of, okay, cool, I've got all these bricks. Now, how do I make the thing that I want, which is, a world-class digital experience hub and platform and, best class experiences and all these kinds of things, right? How do we get from this jumble of different things? So yeah, I think we can jump in and start talking about, how technology is solving this problem, which I think is really fun and interesting, right? I'm a nerd, right? So that's what I get excited about, aside from, playing with Lego, even as a fully grown human. Who doesn't like breaking out the bricks and having some creative fun. And I think that's what we're empowering businesses to do now as well, is to figure out whatever those needs are of today, right? Yesterday you needed the castle, but tomorrow you're going to need a spaceship. You've still got the same building blocks that are going to get you there. You might need to add some things and remove some things, but with this modular idea, it becomes easy.
Yeah, this is exactly it, and reminds me very much of how, one VP of engineering like came to us and is like, well, I have like a marketing team who has like this initiative, and they want to go and just like build something really quickly, and it's like in one of these kind of like monolithic solutions or like all-in-one kind of bundles that's kind of easy to get started with. But he's like, I can foresee the future. I've done this enough years that at the end of the day, my engineers will have to support it. So, and like for him, it was you're bringing me something that's uncomposable, right? I will never be able to like plug it into the system. It will always be something external, right? So I think that's a piece of it as well. So yeah, Nick, give us the breakdown on Contentstack and tell us all about it.
Sure. So in a completely unbiased vision, we are the greatest of all of the headless content management systems, right? So what does that mean, right? From a quick definition perspective, the first thing that we need to know is that there's no front end, right? When you're going with a headless platform, hence the name front end. Sorry, I had to let a dog out of a room, of course, right on time. And so when we start thinking about that, right, that this is typically in the beginning of somebody's journey of building this big Lego set, one of the places that people often start, not always, but often, is with the content management system, because that's going to drive a lot of the other things. And also, typically, those legacy platforms were CMSs, so people have a tendency of starting there as well. And really, when you're looking for any of these different composable tools, whether it's a CMS or not, it doesn't really matter. You need to make sure that the platform is making the composable journey easy. And there's a whole variety of things that we're going to talk about that facilitate that ease of adoption, the ease of pivoting and being able to change. As the market changes and the economy changes, you need to flex your digital strategy. We had a massive organization come on and join us as a customer recently, and they've decided to shut down all their brick and mortar stores, right? So they're going, full digital. So it can be something as, intense as that. And that was a big pivot that they needed to make. Or it could just be, hey, we want to improve our digital platform and experience. It all sort of starts at this core of technologies. So if we kind of jump to the next slide, I think that'll help articulate a little bit, right, is some of the things that you're looking for. And again, I know super biased here, but we need to make sure that as we're setting up this core, that we always have things like security, we need to have performance, and we need to have flexibility at the center of attention. And when we think about flexibility, it's not just in terms of being able to hot swap and plug and play different platforms, to reuse an archaic Microsoft term, but we also need to be able to have choice, right? Where does the code live? Is it going to be a multi environment platform, right? You need to kind of digest all of these decisions up front to help streamline the decision-making process. There's a lot of composable solutions out there for whatever it is that you're looking for, whether it's asset management, search, content management systems, right? It's a very, very saturated field in this composable space. So what really, I think, helps businesses a lot is figure out, okay, which of these platforms are going to help connect the technology and the end user, right? The marketer, the editor, whoever needs to be creating the campaign or getting the product video out to launch quicker, right? It's about being able to connect those things. And again, I think Contentstack does that in a pretty API first way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But more than that is the out of the box support for taking that pile of Lego and saying, what are we going to turn this into? So if we jump to the next slide, which is where I thought we were going to, sorry, I derailed there a little bit, is you need to think about the holistic stack that you want, not just the content stack, but what platforms are we going to be incorporating and integrating? And does the vendor that I'm looking at have these out of the box solutions to make that easier? That's the key from my nerdy perspective. If I want to grow this big digital experience, I don't want to do it with code. I don't want to do it by writing custom integrations all the time, right? Of course, there's need for that, right? Every business is different. Not every use case is going to be solved with an out-of-the-box integration app or whatever it might be. And so this is one of the things, right? Here's just our little kind of brag sheet of all the different tools that we've been integrated with. A bunch of these are available within our one-click marketplace. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is that it's a shameless plug, of course, but also it's that idea, right? If you can go into a tool and just say, hey, I'm now connected to this other tool, now you've made that easy. And if the two things are connected in the interface, and I can't stress that enough, right? If I go into Contentstack, for instance, I can pull my images and my assets out of my DAM. I might even have the facility to manage some of those things given my permission, right? So now these backend tasks that would typically involve a marketer or an editor going from one platform to another platform to another platform are all happening in a single pane of glass, right? That was always the dream. And it's now become a reality as these platforms are just getting tighter and tighter and tighter integrated with each other, right? There are now certain platforms that don't even have a UI, that are just all APIs. And the UI then becomes the integration itself, right? So when we think about taking the technical prowess of how these things are built from a scalable and performant perspective with all the available security options, yada yada yada, and then combining that and making it easy to use, that's the thing that allows you to take a pile of those Lego bricks and say, this is how I make it a castle. There's a path. It's not something that you need to kind of reinvent every time you want to do it. There's proven methodologies, there's best practices and guidance and all of those kinds of things. So yeah, I think that really helps, especially when it comes to that cross-functional nature, right? Is how do we get different people from different departments all sort of on board? Well, one big way is by taking a bunch of these different things that all just work together. And if we jump to the next slide, I'll kind of give a little example of a story, right?
Mhm.
So a part of the Contentstack core platform is something called the Automation Hub that allows businesses to just do things, right? It allows us to automate the automatables. It takes these business workflow processes in the back end that would typically require me or somebody else to go in and do something in one platform, then in another. So one of the examples that I really like is this idea of if somebody needs to create a piece of content that's related to a product from BigCommerce, that then needs to go and get indexed in an indexing platform. But before that, I need to pick my images. And at some point, all of that needs to get translated. I am a very forgetful person. I will forget automatically to do one of those steps. So if we can set up a process where all somebody has to do is go and create the content, then all of these things happen asynchronously in the background. Or maybe something happens in a different platform and we can trigger one of these workflows, right? So I like the fact that in this little example, you can actually start in the middle where it says BigCommerce sync product data. If somebody goes and adds a new product in that e-commerce engine or any other e-commerce engine, it can tell something like the Automation Hub, start this process. Tell a marketer they need to enrich this data. Go and send a Slack notification to this team once it's done and say, hey, this is published, right? Go sell this new product or whatever it might be. And all the while, a bunch of translated versions of that are automatically getting published on the front end. It's these sorts of things that really break down those barriers between different teams, different departments, different divisions by making that experience seamless. So you don't have to send a Teams, Slack, Skype, AOL Instant Messenger, whatever it happens to be, over to someone and say, hey, can you go do your job, right? Having automation built into these digital experiences is really allowing different teams to, one, just automate the things that you don't need to do, right? If something is happening over and over and over again, you could most likely get a computer to do it for you, right? It is 2023, great advances in technology have been made. I don't need to manually translate anything anymore. Pretty sweet stuff. But I think when we're looking at these different technologies and these different abilities for these tools to be integrated, right? We talked about a one-click marketplace and Contentstack and the automation hub. It's all API first. There's a variety of SDKs, and that's going to be true of all of the good composable platforms. So again, not a shameless plug, but these are the types of things that when you're struggling with the idea of how do we go composable, how do we bridge that digital divide between our different departments, the easier it is to integrate, the easier it is to maintain, and the easier it's going to be for the end users of the platforms to be able to do what they need to do in the tool they need to do it. And as we're going to see in a little bit, right, you don't even need to do all of this in our platform, right? I know this has been, sort of out one to many, but these things need to be many to many relationships.
Mhm.
If I am a product manager, I don't need to go into Contentstack. I need to go into my PIM or my e-commerce engine, and then that should tell the people whose responsibility it is to do something. So, yeah, that's just a little bit about, I think, how some of the tooling that's baked into some of these platforms can really make it easy to overcome a bunch of those initial hurdles that you might have to face when going from that sort of the Playmobil into the full-on Lego castle. And so I think there's just a couple of quick case studies just to kind of put the proof points in there. Just super quick, right? When we look at folks like Icelandair, they were able to turn around quite a drastic change in how they were dealing with their digital experience platforms, right? It used to take them 30 to 40 minutes to publish changes. Now, when you're in a world where volcanoes are erupting and there's disruptions all over the place, that is just not appropriate. So they evaluated a bunch of folks and then ended up going down this path because of how easy it is to manage the 16 different locales. And they're a language first organization, right? So things have to be translated before anything goes live.
Mhm.
So when you combine those needs with this 90% reduction in publishing time, reduction of all these backlog issues, simply by going to these composable solutions, because it's not their implementation isn't just Contentstack. It's a bunch of these other things like mobile apps, booking engines, their Jet Center, right? All of these things that we get to surface information and really allow for a much better experience. And again, if we just jump to the last slide, the things that you should always look for with these different composable ideas is speed, scale, and honestly, support is a huge part of it, right? Because the speed is going to be intrinsic to a lot of these platforms, and with that, you're going to get that scalability. But you need to make sure that there is a great caliber support backing that up. And I don't just mean a help desk or a call center. I mean best practice guidance, right? A roadmap that's going to keep delivering excellence across what your needs are. It's the organization supporting you and your brand with what your goal is for your composable journey. All right, so I think that's just a lot of kind of all over the world thought for different composable ideas. So I think we can jump over to the Stackbit view on that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is very much in line with the way we're thinking about it, right? I think like both about the way that to make that, and allow each one of the constituents or the stakeholders, right, in a cross-functional org to work where they need to, right? So a lot of the automation that you're talking about would be done either in code or in a platform like Contentstack that kind of can do, that type of automation. Marketing folks might prefer to work on one surface on the glass and edit in a WYSIWYG fashion. Designers probably prefer to work in their own tool, right? If it's Figma or something like that, and then kind of have that integrate in there. So I think we're big proponents of letting folks be unblocked helps them collaborate well, right? So I think our main kind of the way we're presenting this is that we're enabling developers to kind of set up these digital experiences without having any restrictions on whatever choices they want to make with their building blocks. And essentially, then they want to hand them over to business users for them to just manage independently in a no-code environment for them, right? That's the idea. So if we move on to the next slide, and this will be this is an evolving one, so I have to click through it. So yeah, exactly. So like this terminology of like DXC has been introduced by Gartner last year, digital experience composition, right? So rather than like a platform that has everything kind of bundled in one place. So this is essentially a tool for business leaders and like digital leaders in technologically savvy organizations, right? That have collaborative cross-functional teams. And they want like to help them build these digital experiences. And I know like it sounds like fancy words, but it's like cross-functional teams. It just means like you have developers and designers and marketers and analysts and whatever kind of like working together. If you have like a developer just building a page, they'll probably just like code it in, make the changes themselves. It's probably the fastest and easiest thing for them to do. So the next bullet actually talks about how we are very cognizant of, we don't want to add like the more glue and the more specialized pieces you add in that, stack, it like makes other things not stack appropriately with it, right? So we're very much with the belief and the motto, like we don't have any restrictions on your front end framework or your deployment tools or like everything, right? There are no extra dependencies. You don't have to write your components in a certain way for the demo that you're going to see to work, and for you to have a kind of what you see, what you get in context editing experience. And there's like, so nothing is essentially like locking you in, right? A lot of platforms are like, well, sure, we'll provide you with this, but then you have to register your components in a certain way. And this kind of like creates friction and like forces you to make decisions that are not future-proof, right? In many ways. So the next thing is that, kind of like breaking it down. So developers can have the flexibility to create whatever architecture they need. And I think, like Nick, to your point, a lot of the things will be, integrations that exist, but others are just things that don't exist, right? You have a legacy database that stores some of the information, and you don't necessarily, like, you can't get it out. And you definitely don't want marketers kind of like digging in, like making changes and do like a Bobby drop tables or whatever there. But this enables that separation, right? So developers can focus on the innovation and the flexibility that they need. And then the next bullet talks about the designers, right? And I think like one of the things that we're talking about is in this like visual editor is you'll give people the ability to build their own pages, but you want to do it still on brand, right? I think we've all seen, these situations where your brand is your website, but then suddenly you have, like, as you said, Nick, like something happens right now and I need to get something out. My internal processes are not supporting this. So I'll go to like some external system that creates landing pages or whatnot. And it's going to be like, well, it's kind of pink. And here's a low resolution logo that I found somewhere, and it's going to like dilute my brand. And, guess what? I've worked in many, many companies over the years. Not only does it dilute your brand and reduces trust, but also now if you have done it internally, guess what? Somebody else that has like malintent can also start, trying to like publish things in your name. Because like, it's not exactly that, but they've done things in the past that are not exactly on brand. So designers I think are very care very much about it. And then finally, marketers and content ops people, they want to be independent, and they want to just, the moment something happens, to push it out, and they want to see it visually. They want to make sure they're not breaking the site. They want to see how it looks on various platforms, and it doesn't all appear, right? To your point, like I think like headless appears in one place, but then like you have multiple channels where that information goes to. And the final bullet is essentially talking about, essentially our customers, and we'll transition also kind of like showcasing to use cases. It's like what they're seeing is with these platforms, they end up being faster to market, both like in the initial setup, but also like in any subsequent changes that they're making. Both teams are more efficient, right? You don't have to like be like Jira tickets back and forth. It's like, hey, can you like make this like change and typo and whatever? It's like, no, developers can focus on the innovation. Marketers can focus on just getting the job done, and ended up with a more quality experience, because you don't have to compromise, because like, oh, I won't do this change because it will take too long or whatever. So just kind of briefly talking about our customers. The first one is TELUS, a big Canadian telco. Kind of already had a system in place. They had a headless CMS, and they also had like an atomic design system. And the atomic design system essentially is very flexible, right? So those of you who don't know what it is, it's like you have essentially atomic components. So these can be like a button, a form, a text field, an image. And you also have the ability to compose them in a layout. So you have rows and columns. So if you think about a specific section now, like say like a hero section on top of your page, it will be like, well, it's 1 row and 2 columns. And the left column or the right column is going to be an image. And the other column will have like 4 more rows. One of them will be the title, right? So it's great in terms of flexibility, but very hard, I think, for a lot of people to think that way every time they need to build a component, right? So exposing that architectural flexibility to the marketers and content ops is kind of hard. And editing essentially without seeing exactly what you're doing is also hard for some folks, right? So like they've found it's like training is becoming way easier, and page creation is like 10 times as fast. And Takeda is like a different type of use case, right? They came in from a monolithic system, and they decided they want to, completely revamp their digital workspace, their marketing site, and everything. And they knew that they would need different teams with different types of expertise to work on different experiences. Like the marketing site is one, the internal app they have for kind of like a marketplace is another. And all these things, they wanted to have the ability to essentially customize the editing experience. And I think that's one of the key things that we'll show in a second is like Stackbit is not necessarily like, hey, here's the editing experience for your marketers and that's it. It's essentially up to each organization to be able to set that up in the way they want. More granularity, less granularity, what controls are available to which role, etc. So before we go to the demo, I'll have like the last slide that like talks about kind of like highlights the way essentially we integrate, right, with Contentstack. And it's a lot of technical stuff. Don't worry about it. Like the main thing I think I want you to take away from this is on the right, you essentially see the production site, if you will, like or your website's code base, right? And that pulls content, right, from Contentstack to populate and create the pages and then publish them. And we're not trying to essentially get into that flow in any way, right? Like, so developers should use like Contentstack's native APIs to pull the content, not change anything in the way they work, not be dependent on Stackbit in any way, right? Separately, so kind of like on the bottom, you can see like this is the Stackbit UI that runs in a container. So we have our controls and we have like the iframe of your actual site running as a live preview, right? So whenever somebody makes a change on that page, and you'll see in a second, it actually syncs back to Contentstack all the way, runs through the validations that are in place. And if there's like if there are workflows there that are triggered, then they would be triggered, right? And all of it happens in complete seamless integration with Contentstack. Cool. So I think with that, we can like jump into a demo and talk about concrete things and as we see them.
Perfect. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pull up the demo here. Give me a moment. The suspense.
Well, it's a demo, also like, it's a live demo. Probably something will go wrong, we know.
If something can, it will, or however that saying goes.
Yes.
Oh, all right, here. So you can see here I have up on screen a website that is using both Stackbit and Contentstack. And you can see that it doesn't look like your typical site in the sense of there's a lot more features, a lot more controls that you have thanks to Stackbit's visual editor. But to kind of focus on or to hone in on what Dan and Nick were both saying around this two-way sync with content, let's go to Contentstack. So I have it up here, but let me say I want to specifically focus in on this template here. So let's go edit in Contentstack. And we'll take us right to that section. So you can see here the text business consulting. Let's update this to the best business consulting. We'll go publish right in Contentstack. Then when we go back to Stackbit, we can see firsthand here. 1 second here. Like we said, when something can go wrong, it always will.
I think you probably need to send it.
Yep, you just need to click that send purple button after publish.
All right.
Send
Here we
it.
go.
Exactly. Woohoo.
Perfect. The best business consulting. So you can see though how quick it is to activate that two-way sync, and then it does work the other way as well, where Dan was mentioning editing on the glass. So that is a term we use where you can literally come into your site and make changes directly on the glass. So say from best business consulting to in best business consulting in the world. And this is a great way to see your changes immediately. I know a lot of marketers, one of their big pain points is making these changes and not being able to see them immediately. How does it actually look on the page? Sometimes they have an image or an idea in their head, and how it's translated comes across differently. So now if we go back into this entry here and we just refresh Contentstack, we can see here we now have in the world. So that's really honing in on the two-way sync of using both Contentstack and Stackbit. And I'm going to actually scroll down a bit. Give me a sec here. My mouse froze. My mouse is freezing a little bit, so bear with me. This is what happens when we say something might go wrong.
If you didn't say it, it would have been way worse if we hadn't said it. Just so
it's true. So you can see here we have this meet the team section. And as our team's growing out, we want to be able to quickly come in and update and add new person. So right now, if we go into add people, so adding a new person using this preset, let's go into existing here. We can see we have 3 different people. Let's go into, let's try Tiff Jansen here.
And these objects are, again, coming in from Contentstack. These are things that are defined already in there.
And if I go to your point, Dan, if I go to then with this shortcut here, edit in Contentstack, we can see exactly where this is coming from. So here is where it says Tiff Jansen. We can also do something, let's say, let's type in developer advocate. Loves working with developer advocates. Perfect. And we go back to publish, send. There we go here. And we can see the changes reflected immediately. Now let's go into adding in an image here. Image block, add image. And let's add in this person here. Should have added a picture of myself if I'm using my name, but that's okay. And you can see though, the styling, everything is the same, is already reflected the same as the other cards. Now this can be updated to be individually, to look differently, but because I was using this template for the other people, I was able to very quickly and seamlessly create a new update right on the glass, create this new card, and then see my content as well back in Contentstack. So if I go up here a sec, I want to show you how to, I don't know why my mouse is being so tricky. I'm going to show you how, another thing that a lot of marketers really focus on is when you are building and iterating, you are creating new pages very frequently. And a lot of times this can create friction between, I know for myself, speaking of past experiences, between developers and marketers. I remember marketers coming to me and, hey, Tiff, we need this new page up like yesterday. And like, okay, well, let me stop what I'm actually doing and the feature I'm building, and let's start putting up together this new page. And no longer does that need to be the case. They can simply come in. Give me a sec here. Am I frozen for you, the both of you? Or am
No,
I?
you're fine.
Okay, I was frozen.
You are a little bit, but now it's fine.
Okay, perfect. So you can simply come in here and add new page. But actually, before I do that, I want to share with you. So right before this call, I was playing around on here and I saved this entire page as a preset. So you can save different components as presets, which will then be reflected back in Contentstack. But I actually saved this entire page. So if I go into page, add new page, we can now see that the page I saved, landing page, is there. So this is great when you are iterating quickly and creating new pages that might be similar to one another. You want to reuse some content or the structure. Decide, let's call this page about us.
Yeah, so I think as you're typing and creating a new page, in this case, right? So like a page consists of, if we're talking about atomic design, it's an organism contains molecules, right? And each one of them is like, so in this case, sections. So this allows you essentially as a marketer or a content ops person to take advantage of all the flexibility that has been built into the code and the extracting the content out of it, right? So essentially the developer has given you a lot of flexibility in terms of like, hey, these are a lot of controls and each one of them is a piece of content, right? It's like, is the layout vertical or horizontal? Is it like flipped or not flipped? The title itself, all of these are pieces of content that reside within Contentstack, right? So now the presets that Tiff mentioned are essentially a way for you to say, I want a snapshot of this thing, of all the content that has made this component what it is, because I'm going to reuse it, right? And you can do it at the component level, or Tiff, maybe you can show that like on the section level, you can also click on the section and then do save. It gives you the flexibility to create, your own component, while in fact you're not, right? You're adhering to the exact component that was built by the developer, and you're able to make only the changes that are essentially approved or designated by the designer, right? So it's like, if you noticed here, you're not able to say, well, you know what, I want to create a button that's like purple, right? No, you have to like your options are primary or secondary based on whatever has been defined by the designers as the brand colors.
Exactly. And that goes back to, Dan, what you were mentioning before too, to reiterate that with designers being able to not only work in their preferred environments, but also set up those guardrails. So, sometimes I'll speak for myself as a content creator. Sometimes you like to get a little too creative from what actually the designers were like, hey, stay in these reins, stay in these guardrails. And it's great because you can move more efficiently with having those guardrails set up. You know what you're quote unquote allowed or enabled to be using when it comes to the different colors or color palettes, rather than wondering, is this going to be okay? Do I have to, ping the designers again?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm saving this as a preset here.
Just to type in any, pick any category, it doesn't matter. You can do it in sections. And then save. And now when you go essentially to, you can open up either tab or like do a plus. And then essentially it will show you the same. It will show you the same essentially if you do create new. It will essentially show you that section that we just created, right? Meet the team, and then you can like reuse it, right? So it's an easy way for you to like instantiate all these objects at once with the content in place.
Exactly. With a few other ones too. So you can imagine though, as you continue to do what Dan's mentioning, saving as presets, how this library continues to grow and grow to more different options to use based on what your workflow is.
And I think so I think if we're thinking about the workflows, right? So when you're setting up all your authors, for example, it's way more streamlined, I would say, to go in and like you won't be necessarily adding them visually because you're adding tools to your tool set, right? You're just adding all the authors. So like you would probably go and prefer not to do like a completely new one from scratch right here that shows only a piece of it, but you would go actually to Contentstack and just like work there, right? And to your previous example, I think, Nick, like some people will be specifically working in the PIM, for example, adding products, right, to the catalog. They would add those products, and then, but maybe like the when you're coming into the experience on the page, you want to like, oh, I want to highlight this product. So I want to like, now I'm going to take the content from the PIM in here.
And I think like just to double down on that, the ability to have a choice in how you're going to do that, right? Which interface needs to be used for the right thing, right? If I got a spreadsheet of 50 authors that I need to load in, I'm not going to do that through a front end application. I'm going to do it through the back end. But if I need to make the component that is going to be reused from one section to another section, then I absolutely want to do that so I can do it visually, save that as a preset, and then pull out the relevant data on whatever page that's going to live on. So, I mean, you couldn't come up with a better articulated version of letting experts be experts in the platform that they want to use for it. I like it.
Exactly.
I like that saying, Nick, letting experts be experts in the platform they want to use. I'm going to steal that from you.
All right. Our marketing team might have some words. I stole it
Okay.
from them. It's fine.
Yeah, so I think to your point, this makes total sense. And if you go back to Stackbit, I think like one of the things that, like, for example, if you wanted to change, for example, the background of this meet the team section, right? You wanted to change it. Not this, like, actually you would go to the sorry, you go to the with the pencil.
If
I know your mouse is kind of like working
it's
pretty
stressing
hard.
me out. I don't know why.
Yeah, so I think in this case, changing the color, you would want to do it like in right here on the screen, right? And be able to like say, well, does it work well with the previous section or not? Doesn't work well with the previous section. Drag and drop the sections so you can see like they have like the affordances, so you can like move people around and do all these things. Would make more sense, right? And you could, for example, could see like, well, this dark background doesn't work because the text has to be in a specific way or whatnot. Exactly. So yeah, I think that's kind of the demo. I think there are a bunch of things more that we could show in general, how editing works, but it's like probably any, like this would work as expected from a modern, visual editor. The distinction here is like it's backed by a modern composable stack with the CMS that you chose, right? With your front-end data, front-end framework, pulling data, from your internal APIs or whatever you need to get the experience that you need out there, right? And obviously, so like there's an integration with Cloudinary right here, which will tie into the same Cloudinary that you're using in Contentstack, right? So all these things are connected. I think all the pieces that are there, the search with Algolia also kind of exists here and like lets you control whatever you want. And again, I think we're kind of repeating it at this point, but it's like work wherever you feel that is most beneficial to you, to your need at the moment, and to your profession in general.
Exactly. I'm going to switch to see if there's any questions here. Give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea, Dan, that we're finally at a place where you can say things like it just works as expected, and that's a truism now, right? Like I love that. I love this choice that we're giving people, right? I mean, when you think about all of the different ways in which people learn, right? The same thing is true about how people need to use software. I think for decades now, it's been this is the right way. This is the path you as a user need to go to make a thing happen. Like I love seeing that paradigm breaking down completely and allowing people to say, hey, I need to check these colors. I need to visually inspect this as I'm doing it, or I want to go do bulk operations. And the fact that these things are so tightly coupled that all of the benefits of each platform are just enhancing the other benefits of the other platform. So where typically you see a lot of composable conundrum, I don't know if that's a term, but it should be, is where you get too much overlap with things, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, and this is one of the problems with these legacy monoliths is if you're paying for stuff you're not using, it just feels bad, right? And I think by the way in which these things are integrated, right, it's bringing the best parts of each other to light. So it's, I don't know, sorry, I'm getting all fanboy now. This is a great demo that you did.
And it allows you to also change these choices because it's not always about you. Frameworks are sunsetted every once in a while, and we see this like all of a sudden there's a kind of a rush to get off a specific thing that's kind of like dying, or you can't hire developers anymore. They don't want to work with this system. I think one of the things that we're really excited about that we're adding right now is the same process that we have gone through and I have already like kind of matured with headless CMSs, right? Is in the beginning, right, there was this like the hello world was inside the code. And then the developers took it out and said, okay, I'm going to place it somewhere. Right? And this somewhere will be in a headless CMS because I need to reuse it in multiple places, because I need to translate it, because I need to do all these operations on this content. And mainly because I don't want every content change to be a code change and a commit and all these things. So by separating these two things, essentially the developer now says, okay, like essentially like show this variable, and in the build process, you're pulling the correct data, putting in there, and presenting it. We're going through the same process with like a new part of the stack as well, if you will, which is like for now we're calling it like composable design. So instead of taking a design from Figma and kind of implementing it, or trying to use one of those tools that like generates code for you, you can go through the exact same process and say, well, the color of this button, instead of like saying that it's green, it's actually coming in from Figma. And the corner radius of this button, right? Instead of like writing 25, I would write it's Y, and it's coming in from Figma. And then this connection enables you to do the same thing. So it enables the designers to work in a more structured way, and similarly to the headless CMS, because if you would take the content and just spill it into like a flat file with no structure, it will also not work, right? So this is why there is a schema, right? And I think like the schema describes how the headless CMS stores the data. So the same thing is like, because Figma is, has tokens and is also structured, you can do the same thing with Figma. And then like a designer would work in Figma, update those presets that you've seen that will be immediately available, or update the colors that are available to you as the marketer to work with. So I think this is kind of like an interesting direction that the world is going into. Coupled with, I think, the information that is done, not necessarily, and I think we're not showing it in this demo, but we're happy to show it separately. Sometimes when you're editing, you also want to, now that like, what, Nick, actually, I think that this is like, like now we kind of understand how, yeah, it's as expected. You can edit the content, right? Now we're moving to the next level of you're expected to edit the content smartly, right? In a way that makes sense, right? So for example, what we've seen some companies do is like on taking advantage of the fact that you can see things visually within Stackbit, and knowing that you're running in this like special, development environment, you can say, well, how about we pull information that it's not information that goes onto our website. It's like, let's say, analytics information. And I want to overlay this over the actual site. And now when I make my edits, I have more pieces of info that will be like, hey, this actually, the CTR of this button is not performing. I need to change it. And so making these like edits more, educated and intentional. So I think my point here is being like, we're trying to grow the stack even more, right? All these things that you can compose together, trying to do more of those. And I think that's where, to your point, the automation, right, that you're able to do also makes a lot of sense, because like at some point you have like all these tools, you will forget to update one piece when you change the other. Tiff, did you have any questions, or is it a good time to wrap up?
Yeah, no, thank you, Dan. No immediate questions, but I know a lot of individuals will be watching this after the fact. So any questions that come to mind for anyone watching this afterwards, leave it down below and I'll be monitoring them. So feel free to continue to ask questions. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Dan, for your time. This has been, I really enjoyed listening to this conversation, and it was great. So thank you both.
Thank you, Tiff.
Thank you, Tiff. And I hope your mouse feels better.
I know.
Yes.